Okay, the next sheet that we're going to be working on is the VLOOKUP starter file. So let's switch over to the VLOOKUP starter. And again, to make this easy on ourselves, because we are working along in these sheets, I'm actually going to come up to the top of my conditional starter. I'm just going to highlight my first two rows. So click on the 1, drag down to the 2, so that you have both 2 rows. And I'm going to do a Control-C to copy, and I'm going to bring this over into this other file and do a Control-V by clicking in the first cell, A1, and that Control-V pastes what I had copied into my Excel spreadsheet. So again, this looks identical to the spreadsheet that we finished in the conditionals video. And that's because it is. I'm just going to teach you a new way to do those conditionals where you don't have to list a bunch of nested if statements. So again, I'm going to zoom in on here, and we're going to start with just the top of this screen. And our first box is user's choice, and we want to output the corresponding serial name, and then again we have our day of the week and its corresponding serial name. So here, so that we don't have to write all those nested if statements to make all of our corresponding choices, so 1 to Cheerios, 2 to Cocoa Krispies, and so on, we're going to restrict the user to selecting from a drop-down menu, so they can't input anything incorrectly. And so here at the top, I'm going to go and click in cell B12. I'm going to go to the Data tab. And then on the Data tab, if I extend out my spreadsheet, I get this option for data validation here. And so this data validation, when I click here and select the data validation option, I've got the option to do any input, any whole number, any decimal, list, date, time, and so on. So we're going to create a list, and then we're going to tell it where the source of this list comes from. So if you click on this little icon that kind of shows to a cell, it pops out a box, and we are going to select the list of numbers. So I'm going to start in A6 through A10. Using this colon operator to separate out. So I just clicked in A6 and dragged down to A10, highlighting all of those cells, but you could also type this in as a formula yourself. Then I'm going to click back to go back to my little message box here. So I have my list, I have my source of where it's coming from, and I'm going to click OK on that box. So now, beside this box at the very bottom right corner, you kind of see a drop-down menu list. So if you click on that, you can select out of the menu of options for your user. I'm going to go and do that same exact thing in cell B15. I'm going to add my drop-down list. So again, up to the top, go to my Data tab, go to Data Validation, and I'm going to select a list. And in my source, I can either type it out, and so when I type this out equals, I'm going to select B6 through B10. Again, it automatically cell references for me. Click OK, and so now I can select from my drop-down menu, and I'm forced to select only from the options that I give them as a user. So now we want to code in how we get the serial name. And so if I have a user choice and say I select a 2 here in cell B12, in cell B13 I'm going to start a formula. Except instead of doing all of those nested conditionals that we did on the last sheet, I'm actually going to use the VLOOKUP function because I'm looking up this value that the user has selected in B12 in this table of breakfast cereal choices, where this value in B12 needs to occur in the first column or first row, depending on what type of lookup you are doing. In a vertical lookup, a VLOOKUP, it should be the first column. In a horizontal lookup or H lookup, it should be the very first row that your user's choice value occurs in. So here I'm going to do a VLOOKUP And so for the syntax of my VLOOKUP statement, I'm looking up what cell that uniquely identifies my data. So in this case, my lookup value comes out of B12. I put my comma in there. So now going back to my slide, I need to tell it what table to look this B12 value up in. So I come back to my thing here, and this is my table, A6 through C10, because we want it to contain not only the first value that we're looking up in column 1, but we want what's in the third column of this table in column C. And then we want it to output, so what is the column index number, or what column are we pulling from? So this is column 1, column 2, column 3 is C, so 3. And then it's going to ask us, do we want an approximate match? So we enter the word true, or an exact match, where it inputs the false. We want an exact match in this course. We'll never use the true statement to get an approximate match. So we finish out our statement. So we are VLOOKUPing our value out of B12 in this table of A6 through C10. We're going to pull our information that corresponds to whatever is found in B12 out of column 3, and then we want an exact match. So when I do this, I get Cocoa Krispies because 2 is my user choice here, so it's going to follow this row across to whatever column I designate and pull that information. So we're essentially indexing our data out of this table using our row, whatever corresponds to this user choice, out of the first column and finding it out of its corresponding column. So here we're going to do this again. We're going to choose an option for our day of the week, and then we're going to write our VLOOKUP statement. So VLOOKUP, and we are going to look up what's in B15 this time. But now we've got to adjust our table because our serial or a day of the week comes out of B6 through C10. So we need a shortened an array or table here. And then we are going to pull out of column 2 with our exact match for our serial name. So now when we get Thursday, we get Frosted Flakes. If I come back up here and choose Monday, it automatically updates to Cheerios for me. And that VLOOKUP statement shortens our nested conditionals into a much easier option. So now we can do the same down here, where we use our data validation to restrict our user to our day of a week. So here in cell B30, and click on my data validation and create a list. Select my source for my list, which is the day of the week, and click OK. So I can choose Tuesday, and then based on my Tuesday, I can either write my nested conditionals, or I can do my much easier VLOOKUP statement to look up what is in B30 out of this first little table, report out of column 2, because there's only 2 columns in my table, with an exact match to pull out what type of cereal I have here. So now we're already that much quicker through this spreadsheet, where we can now do our choices for our user. So here, I have to start my conditional statement. But does our conditional statement, can we use VLOOKUPs in that conditional statement to shorten that statement? The answer in that case is no, because this was a logical conditional using ands and ors based on different choices the user made. So to make that easier on yourself, you can either try and recode this from the start, or you can come back to your conditional starter, click on cell C31, do a copy, come back over to your VLOOKUP starter, and paste, and it is automatically going to output your statement for you. So based on my Tuesday selection, I end up with choose 3, 4, or 5 as my option, so then I can tell my user what to select from their drop-down menu again. So let's create that user's choice drop-down. So clicking on data validation, making that list again, telling it what source. So in this case, we want numbers from the middle of this table up here from column C24 through C28. Clicking OK, and if we choose a 2 here, instead of a 3, 4, or 5, we should get an error message in cell C32. And again, that error message was based on user choices, so we can't necessarily use our VLOOKUP if we go back here and look at our statement. There's nowhere that we're actually pulling data. We are actually only coding in our choices. So if I hit escape and get out of my code here, click back in that cell and copy it, I'm going to copy it over to the current spreadsheet, the VLOOKUP starter. And now it's going to tell me to choose again because my options don't match for sugary and my choices of 3, 4, or 5. So if I change this to a 3, I get a blank, and now I can do my 3. Or my serial name should pop out in cell B33. If I go back and choose 2, my error message shows up. So let's change this to a 4, and let's program for our serial name to come out. So remember, this is based on if C32 is blank, then we do our serial choices. And this is where we did a bunch of nesteds in our true statement to get our serial choice. But now we can shorten this statement using our VLOOKUP. We are going to look up what is in cell B32, because that's where our corresponding number comes from, out of this table of C24 through D28. We're going to pull our serial name out of column 2 with our exact match to our VLOOKUP value in B32. And then if it's anything else, we want to leave that blank. So now that statement gets much shorter. So if I choose 2 here, my error message pops up, my serial name goes away. If I change my day of the week to Friday, which is healthy, and my options 1 or 2, I have 2 in my user's choice, my drop down, my rice checks pops up. So that ends up being a lot easier way when you've got these menus of multiple choices to, number 1, force a menu where users can't make an incorrect choice out of the list that you want them to choose from, and then using your VLOOKUP statements to report out anything based on that user choice out of a list and whatever column the corresponding data comes out of. So there is your simplified lookup statements to get rid of all of those nested conditionals that we were using previously. Hope you enjoy that much easier version using VLOOKUPs.